Alright, so I recently did a video about kind of style, but more kind of theories of how to play, how to find triple triad moves and ways to think. And sort of kind of if you find moves of this type, but looking at it, think a move looks strong and it doesn't come naturally to you. What are thought processes that might help you get there? So today I wanted to sort of play with the different styles against Bot Club Spade. And I played a few games, and then I checked them with the solver, and I made a bunch of mistakes. I played very quickly, but I would not have found some of the moves that were improvements. So I sort of want to present them as I think these were me kind of, I spend, 15, 20, 30 seconds on the position, kind of thinking, what would this style do? Make the move. And I played reasonably well, but there are a bunch of improvements we'll point to throughout. And I kind of wanted to play a game or two for each style. So I asked Bot Club Spade to make a move here, and we will be replying to it. Because I liked this position. I thought it was really interesting to look at in the last video, and I also posted in the Discord, how would you respond to this starter? And we saw players like Vialva and Vid went for the combo moves. Dalamar, Sergio, and Cliffy all went for this capture in two, which I did not really consider. It's definitely a very reasonable move. The six facing out is very difficult for our opponent. It is also difficult for us to take. So this is the kind of move that I think has to work specifically, but they also had a really nice idea in mind. The most similar move I looked at was this. And one advantage of this move, while it's harder to recapture, it does keep 6, 7, 1, 3 in our hand, which gives us a really nice rejoinder to any card in 4 by playing that safely in 8. So I thought this was a nice idea and interesting to see those three players cluster around a move while we see Vid and Vialva cluster around this move. And then we saw a whole bunch here. Deli all played the very similar move, not there, in 9. But 7, 2, 5, 5, and 9 was the move I was thinking. Well, one of the moves I was thinking when watching the game. Um, Apparently, the main move I was considering was this, which no one said. But I went back and watched, and that was apparently the move I was most on. But I thought I liked this little more than Tarama here. This is my second choice. Seto ended up here. I think Metis ended up here. This was a popular choice. Delhi, looking at a position where he in fact played this quite good move, um, he picked something kind of strange here. I think he picked here. And Akiyama also picked a move in 8, both of which the solver quite likes as well. So interesting to see a breakdown of kind of, there were a bunch of players that looked at captures, a bunch of players that liked the 5 setup, a bunch of players that liked kind of the most challenging corner you could play, and some players that liked kind of odd moves in 8. But 8 is a sensible square for there to be odd moves, because 3, 4, 7, 5 controls the squares next to it so well. But yeah, and Turds went for 3, which was a move we analyzed in more detail than the other moves in those videos. Um, Turds I've called an adjacent corner guy and was happy to see him picking out the adjacent corner here. So yeah, interesting distribution of moves there. And I thought, let's look more at this. Let's play games against Bot Club Spade. But Bot Club Spade starts here. So we have whole new problems to solve. And I thought, what would each kind of player play? So I started with face theory. And I wanted to divide face theory. The core idea is we want to have more outfacing sides of our cards that they have trouble taking than the reverse, right? So we look at this starter and we say, okay, I can take that both ways. This card's really important because it's my only capture from 6, but I have lots of captures that can. I have 2 cards, I guess, only 2 that can capture from 8. So I want to keep those captures, and I want to set up stuff that creates problems for them, stuff they have trouble capturing. Now, some moves don't really fit because face theory says we need the recaptures. They can't capture from 2, but we can't capture either, so this is not the kind of move we like. So you start looking around and you start looking, what are, the fewest faces out we can have is 2, which is going to be in a corner or next to their starter. That will also only have 2 out facing. What are cards there we can play that give them stuff they can't take? And I think there's kind of 2 sort of types of face theory players. There's people that like to play closer to the action and people that like to play farther away. Now, there's not really a natural move in 1 here, so we're going to treat the farther away as going in 3 or 7, and the closer moves as going in 6 or 8. So for the farther away, the move that clicked most with me for this is 3-6-5-6, because the 6 cannot be captured by our opponent, and we do have the recapture. You might have thought this move makes more sense. We have the capture from 6 and they do not, but we just gave up our capture of 9 from 6. So I think the face theory move, if you look through the corners, you pretty clearly end up on this as the corner that we have the recaptures of and our opponent can take the fewest ways. And I played out a game against Spade from here, and Spade played the very peculiar. Spade played a number of strange moves over the course of this 5-3, 5-5, and 2. But it's actually pretty clever. We have 2 5s to the right, both of which set them up to be able to plus us. Now, I'm not sure why I actually didn't go for 3, 4, 7, 5, and 6 here. It does walk into a plus, but it doesn't combo too much extra. And I guess our 6-7-1-3 is now kind of needed in 2 places, and maybe I didn't fancy this, but I don't remember why I didn't go with that. We definitely don't want to use 6-7-1-3, that's our big capture, and we do want to lock in our card. I ended up going with Tarama here, dodging combos, and the bot went with 4-4-6-5 and 8, and it seemed really natural to lock in our cards. You know, this face theory stuff is very kind of proper triple triad play. When we have the option to lock in cards, we do so. We're sort of walking into a big combo, but we've locked in 3 and 6 anyway, and that's much more important than any of the cards in the middle row. Those are much easier to recapture as needed, and of course, if they take the big combo, we combo back pretty hard and we win. The bot correctly played here, and we ended up tying this one. So with in this example, and I'm going to maybe do more of these videos playing against different bots, like it'd be fun to play against Joker, and maybe Deuce as well. But in this game against Spade, we tied with me playing the kind of farther away face theory move. But I thought it clearly gave us a reasonable game where they had to be pretty careful here, and where I think they have limited tying options. Like, I think they only have 1 tie here. This generally seemed a much scarier game for them than it was for us. Now, the closer move I came up with, again, we're now looking for moves that interact with their starter, but have at least 1 number facing out that they have trouble taking. 3-6-5-6 again seemed the way to go to me, right? They don't have a capture from 7. They locked in their card, as Bot Club Spade is wont to do, and I now thought the natural thing to do, given our card in 8 is safe to 7, is just to lock it in, and lock it in with something else. It doesn't have to be completely safe, but that just has a bunch of sides facing out that are hard for them to take. And again, actually with this move, I don't think I followed our rules very closely, because I did play these games just very, very quickly. These were not with immense thought put into them. But this move just seemed very natural again, saying, like, it's just really hard for you to interact with this. I suppose technically you can take it and I don't have a recapture from 2, but I can live with that when I have the move in 7. So this just seemed clearly favorable to me. And to tie, Bot Club Spade has to pick the right card to put in 3. They did not pick the right card, and so we actually snuck out a win here. After here, I took to go up 6-4. They have more cards locked in the far right row, but one of the things about face theory is it's putting high numbers out that the opponent has trouble taking, and that actually leads to this position being winning. What happened next? They played 6-3, 6-6, 3-3, and 1, and sadly their 4-4, 6-5 is a dead card when their 5-3, 5-5 would not have been. Note, they can't do it the other way because we have the combo here, and they do not combo back. And there's not some other way to do it, because 7's just a really bad square for them. Our safety to 7 ends up hitting hard. So sure, Bot Club Spade could have tied with, a very similar move. It was probably like a 50-50 whether it would find the tie here or not. But again, I thought we attacked the starter pretty well, got pretty good pressure, and this one happened to convert. And we could play a very coherent kind of, hey, I'm going to put stuff that has numbers they can't take. When they let me, I'm just going to start blocking off the sides that let me lock it in, because the other side they already can't deal with. and build from there. And that's sort of actually a little bit of how Bot Club Spade likes to play, but clearly following this, we can do it at a little higher level than Spade does. So those are my face theory results. Then I started playing combo heavy, and I think this is a style I cannot get away with spending very little time per move, because there were moves I came up with I thought, yeah, this looks good, and the solver said, no, this is losing. So I'm gonna point out that I made a lot of mistakes in the combo games. This could be that it's a style I'm not very good at doing, but it could also be that this is a style that takes more time, right? That is going to, you really have to make sure you figured it out well. Or, and this is sort of connected to that. I mean, it is very connected to that. I shouldn't really say or. It's just a difficult style to play and play well. There are moves that to me looked pretty natural and pretty fitting, and the solver just says it's losing. And in practice, these moves I think could easily win. They set up a lot of combo potential. But I hope we're going to really easily see here how swingy the games are. And I think I'm not going to go into the calculations here because I was too lazy to do them. But I think there are some positions here that figuring out why these appealing moves lose might be a really good way to figure out how to play better in this type of game. And if someone is interested in doing that work and having me check it with the solver, that would be super cool. But no worries if not. So I found two moves here that really appealed to me. Um, I thought we could go in 5 and we had multiple setups. One way to do so is 3-4-7-5, setting up a same in 8, though we also have a backup plus an 8 with 3-6-5-6 that may show up as relevant. Note our opponent does not have an amazing card there, but 6-6-3-3 is pretty good. And we also have 6-7-1-3, which lands nicely for a plus and 6, potentially susceptible to some combos back. And our opponent does not have the same play in 6. So this was the first move that popped out at me. Bot Club Spade played in 2, and I thought, okay, 6 and 8 are great squares. Great squares. So I want to leave them open because they are much better squares for us than they are for our opponent, right? If those are the last two squares on the board and they keep 6-6-3-3, which is clearly their best card for one of those squares, it's completely dead in the other square. They have no card that plays that's going to remotely do well enough in both those squares. And we have such great play in those squares that we usually want to leave them for later. Now, I think the solver says actually that there's a win in 8, and you can find it if you want. But my instinct was leave those squares open. And my other instinct was because we have combos in 6 or 8, it's scary for them to go in the other square if we can combo through. For instance, there is no card they can put in 6 that is safe to the cards in 5 and 9, so we can combo through from 8 if they go there. And if they can't go in 6, we want to go in 3. Now, I didn't really pick the best card to put here. I picked 7-2-5-5, and this does not actually win, though I think the save is kind of deranged. It makes sense to me that it wouldn't win, because sometimes we've flipped too much, and 4-6-7-1 in 1 could combo a lot back, right? If they play something like, and this doesn't work immediately, but if they play something like here, and we take the same, and they go somewhere like here, their 4-6-7-1 is going to flip back a lot of cards on the last turn, and in fact, I think we've lost here. Yeah, we should be lost here. So I can see why flipping 2 would be a bad move. And in fact, the solver identifies the move I should have made is this one here. And this just wins. Very similar idea. And note, it's important I have a backup card for 8. I'm not giving up my combo in 8 by playing Tarama. I was hesitant to get rid of that card, right? I sort of did the automatic thing of talking to my cards and was like, this card is a nice square, this card is a nice square, this card is a nice square, this card doesn't really have a nice square. Let's use that one. But the specifics of it didn't really work out. Clear mistake on my part. And this isn't the only win. 7-4-4 and 3 isn't the only win. As I said, there was also something winning in 8. So a clear big miss, though I think logical how I got there. And I didn't write down what the tie was here, and I don't remember, but still a difficult position to save. It might have been something in like 8, though that seems so implausible, but it might have been. because that 4-6-7-1 picks up really deep combo chains. So like it's not actually that hard to imagine it's here. Maybe it's hard, but not that hard. Really important that we flipped here. Yeah. Anyways, maybe something like that. That said, the game continued. The bot went 6-6-3-3 in one, and I played what I thought was the very logical move of I still have 6 and 8. I'm doing great there. Let's just leave those open and do something else. Where the solver points out 3-6-5-6 and 4 wins, which is a move I'd like to think I would have found in a real game while checking everything, but is kind of hard to see here that it really kills all their cards on the bottom row. Weird to grab 5 rather than grabbing 1. The kind of move you get to by brute forcing everything. Pretty hard to get to this as your instinct. But I did miss another win there. So I played here, and they went 4-6-7-1 and 6, which I think is the only tie. And we end up in a tie. So very close to winning this one, and I think the combo style, our initial move, brought us an immediately winning position. But it turned out to be kind of tricky to bring home, and I missed multiple chances to do so. Um, if we look at a similar line, right, if we had assumed the game would go the same way here, in the previous position, they had some tie. They have some tie after this move. It wasn't this, as we saw, though I didn't punish properly, but there is some tie. This move, there isn't a tie, and the 5 facing down actually is really clunky for them, and 3-6-5-6 will land an 8, and this wins more straightforwardly. So that's what I should have done. But I think an interesting game, and I think my thinking was reasonably good here, right? I played the big combo setup move, and then I kept the squares where I had advantage available for late use, but I was pretty imprecise in the exact cards I was using, and was very messy in the conversion, and didn't end up winning. One other idea I came up with looking for combo moves is I thought 3-6-5-6 and 5 made a lot of sense. We have 2 cards with pluses and 6. We have a really nice plus and 8 with 3-4-7-5. It matches the card in the corner, which means things don't combo through as comfortably, which makes it a really nice plus. Our opponent doesn't have 8. They do have 6. So my instinct was Green Dragon in 5. Probably a little better. They don't share as much of the combo potential. But this game actually ended up being pretty interesting. The solver made a really complicated move, which led to a bunch of ideas. I think the kind of conventional, the face theory type player says you just take 6 here, right? 6 is the kind of locked in-ish square, and while they can hit 6 by comboing through, we're going to have more combo through potential. They have 2 and we don't, but we have both 4 and 8, and that should be sufficient to do it. And if we do block 6, the bot club spade went absolutely nuts here and played this weirdo move. And I thought 3-4-7-5 and 1 was a cute way to finish them. They really can't touch the cards in the middle. They can't take the combos in 2 due to us comboing back so hard in 8. And bot plays here, and then their card's good in 2, but it's not good in both squares. We can win 7-3. But this was a weird move from spade. But I tried a couple other ideas here because I was thinking, what's the big combo setups? Like going in 6 is giving them kind of control of the combos, right? 5 is ours, so they can choose when to flip 5 and when to combo through to the card in 6. And so while blocking 6, it turns out to be the right thing to do, it is appealing to look elsewhere for bigger combo setups. And the first move that came to mind for me here as a bigger setup was 6-7-1-3 in 7. Now this is a really useful card in both 4 and 8, so I wasn't very confident this was a good instinct, but I really liked that Tarama was now good in both 4 and 6. I did note it gave them some good play in 8, but they don't have good play in 4. And I thought the combos here should probably be sufficient. This is pretty decent. And the solver just says, no, this is losing. Again, I don't remember why, but this is just a losing move, right? And it makes some sense. We did make 8 really good for the opponent. They have really good play in both 2 and 8. Yeah. Anyways, so after the solver rained on my parade there, I went, okay, let's look for another interesting way to set up really big combo potential. And I ended up with a Tarama in 1. And I thought, okay, 3, 4, 7, 5 is now really good in 2, as well as being great in 8. 7, 2, 5, 5 is really good in 6, and 6, 7, 1, 3 is good in 4 and 8. All of my cards have some real play somewhere on the board. 7, 2, 5, 5 certainly is the least play, but all of my cards have a lot of combo potential here. And I think that's all true. And this move loses too. So, yeah, it's hard to always play on the diagonal. I think anything of this style, both of the starters, especially Green Dragon in 5 was a better reply to the starter. Both of them don't give us bad positions, but here we sort of have to bail out to, you know, okay, the combos aren't quite good enough. I'm not exactly sure why. We have to kind of bail out and start cashing in. We can't hold the combos forever. And similarly, in this line, like one of the winning moves here is in 8, right? Just using up one of the squares we've set up our combo potential. And the move I tried to do to pay it off in 3 ended up being close to a correct idea, but wasn't correct in itself. I think it's really hard to evaluate when you want to kind of cash in and when you don't. And for me, at least, it takes much more time to figure out. And as I said, I sort of speed played these games, and that made me not able to play the combo style at a particularly high level. And it's fun to play, and I think it will get you some upset wins. But also, clearly, it just like the big combo setup moves often lose, and that's tricky. That's a problem. That said, you know, this move won on the spot. This reply to the starter. I mean, blue has multiple wins in this position. The other reply did not win on the spot, but it's pretty strong to like, this was pretty strong. So not a bad performance for this style at all, but one that, as usual, I hope shows the kind of strengths and weaknesses of it. All right, the next games I played was Talk to Your Cards. So I sort of talked to my cards, and I said, okay, 3, 4, 7, 5 is my only capture in 6. It's pretty happy to be looking down, wishes the game was a little more leftward. 3, 6, 5, 6 has a kind of nice capture in 8, not clear it has much other play. As we've seen, the capture in 8 is nice. That 6 facing out is pretty strong. 7, 2, 5, 5 and 7, 4, 4, 4 are not doing very much. 6, 7, 1, 3 is not too unhappy. It has a kind of fun incidental plus wall in 8 that might come up. And it's happy the game's over on the right. So 7, 4, 4, 4 and 7, 2, 5, 5 are having a bad time. And I could have ended up with either card in 1, but I thought kind of chucking one of those cards in 1 and just saying, hey, every one of my cards has at least one capture on this, and my 2 up cards, my 2 cards with a 7 up, whichever one I play there, the other now has 2 captures on a card, and is just much happier about being able to do something. So I thought this was a nice way to keep most of my hand happy, and spade went here, grabbing safety. We do not, in fact, have a capture on this card. Note, it wasn't initially safe in the corner, but once we block 1, it is safe in 2, because we now don't have plus walls to capture the 7. Here, ooh, I typoed. But here I went with, which cards are happy, which cards are unhappy. Tarama really still doesn't have anything to capture, but it can find some use locking in our card. That seemed a productive thing to do, right? It doesn't seem like Tarama is going to have better uses here than that. And the solver replied, sorry, not the solver, Bot Club Spade replied in 3. I just lost my place. No, it replied in 6, which was a very odd move. And now, by talking to my cards, I sort of went, 6, 7, 1, 3 faces the action nicely. 3 6 5 6 might sweep the bottom really well at the end. 3 4 7 5 probably wants to land in 3 or 5. May as well put it in 3 now before those squares start getting blocked up. And that is indeed a winning move. Did go on to win this one. They went 4 4 6 5 and 8, took 5, and we got ourselves a win. Not an incredibly interesting game, but kind of nice that, out of this sequence of kind of, these two cards don't face the action at all. Let's find a way to get them out of my hand and keep the cards that do face the action. We ended up reaching a winning position against Spade, who, everyone's played Spade a bit. We all know Spade's a pretty good player. Spade has a pretty high win rate, and yeah, they're a good player. So okay, not an easy opponent to beat, and it seemed like getting rid of the cards that didn't make much sense led to a good position quickly. The other idea I had was 7-4-4 in 3. Yes. This was 7-2-5-5 is a bad card, but this gives it use in 6, right? We found a way to give it some threat in this position. And the bot went 5-3-5-5 and 1. And my instinct was very much to just play 7-2-5-5 and 6. It was to say, hey, this card has one square it's good in. Let's use it in that square before that square goes away. But then I thought, no. Now 7-2-5-5 has a card to attack in 1. But what other cards? Because as we talk to our cards, it's not just what direction do they want to face. It's, are they running out of squares they might be able to do something? So I started looking more at 3-4-7-5 and saying, it's pretty unhappy because the game is upright and it wants to go down left. Which means it's probably likely it's going to start running out of squares it's happy to land in. And we sort of wanted to hold on to it because we want to have a threat in 6. It was our only capture in 6. But we've set up another card that can take there. So I felt like now was a really good time to... It has a clear, valuable use. And it's not clear it's going to be good in the future. So it seemed a nice timing to getting it out of our hand. They went in 4, locking in 1. And I thought, okay, I can lock in stuff too. This looks safe to me. It does give up the plus in 5, but their 4-6-7-1 is not such a great card, and can't capture too much at the end. Only got a tie here. This game never came together in quite the same way some of the others did. And I think like when we're giving up this plus in 5, we're the ones trying to tie rather than them the ones under pressure. So I think we ended up not being the ones applying pressure, but the ones kind of taking a little bit of pressure here. But that was another game I kind of got through thinking, let's talk to our cards, see where it gets us. Alright, then we got 2 games with talk to their cards. And I started looking at their hand and thinking, they don't want to go left. They have all these kind of 5s and stuff that just makes it clunky for them to take stuff. And I started honing in on 3-6-5-6 and 1, which is a move face theory doesn't like at all because we don't have the recapture in 2. But it is the move that most says to our opponent, like, this is really uncomfortable for you. You have one way to address this at all, and if you do take it, which the bot did not, but if you do take it, I can play 6, 7, 1, 3, and 7. So because it's a sort of sacrificial corner, but because you have so few ways to address it, if I have a good answer to the only way you can, suddenly it's really tough for you. And I think a reasonable way to get to this type of move is start looking at the opponent's hand and going, what's really unpleasant for them? What really limits their options? That's how I got that idea. The bot then, of course, played 5-3-5-5 and 5, which if you watch the last video, also landed diagonally downright from King Behemoth, and was also a potential problem there. 4-4-6-5 is now really good in both 2 and 4. It makes you think, why don't I build a hand about 3-6-5-6, 5-3-5-5, and 4-4-6-5? Those cards have cool synergy. And the reason you shouldn't build that hand is because all those cards are not very good. And this would not be a good hand. But it is fun how cleanly they combine here. They don't really combine for many other setups, so not the greatest idea, but really, really nice setup here. Um, and then I was struggling, and I was thinking, okay, what do they not want to see? What do I want to see? I'm having trouble now reproducing what I thought here. I think I ended up with a sort of. I think I ended up here. Yeah, I ended up here. I think sort of the idea of, well, if they go here, this is safe and that's pleasant. And if they go here, well, that seemed like a good card in their hand. At least it got that out of their hand. And maybe I have some way to combo through usefully, though maybe I'm not able to take advantage of that. Or maybe I can't do it yet. But not sure how I ended up with this move. It doesn't seem a great move, to be honest. This game kind of ended up as a mess because I did not check if they had this big setup, and they did have this big setup, and I should have remembered about it from before. Spade, for some reason, went here, which I couldn't find a win against, and we ended up playing out a tie. And I don't think there was a win against it. Their move? Why can't I move their cards? Oh, there we go. So we played out a tie here. And that felt like a kind of clunky tie, and I didn't feel good about this one. This was not a good game for talking to their cards. But, I mean, it is clearly kind of a clunky starter already, and then they had a big setup against it, and then it all stopped clicking for me. So I was like, okay, that can't be our example. Let's play another example. Okay. Now, Face Theory didn't like this move because it doesn't like giving up our capture against their card. But if we talk to the cards in their hand, this is clearly the move they want to see least, right? They have no captures from 6. Their ways of capturing from 2 are quite vulnerable, and we have a recapture. This seems like the move with the numbers facing out that gives their hand the toughest time. Now, Bot Club Spade noticed, oh, you've given up your capture in 6? I'm going to block 8, right? I'm going to lock in my card in 9. Very reasonable reply. And I thought, well, what have they conceded, right? What have they given me? What do they now not want to see? And it felt to me like, okay, let's take the safe square. Tarama seems a little bit more useful of a card. For instance, if 4465 lands in 6, Tarama has a plus in 5. It's hard to figure out how 7255 would be all that relevant. So this is what I ended up with. They continued locking in their own cards. And my first instinct was to go something in 5, but they have a lot of combo play against 5. For instance, 7444, they have the plus in 4. 3656, they have a plus in 2. So I was leaning towards 6713 and 5, but then I thought, what are you doing? I know we're in calculation mode with 4 moves left, but like, let's talk to our opponent's cards again. And then it was instantly apparent, oh yeah, this card's just safe. Let's play that. And as soon as I noticed this move, it was clearly pretty powerful. They have no captures of our card in 4. Their only capture in 2, we combo back with the same in 5. Now they do have a tie here. What is their tie here? If they go 6633 and 5, we combo them to hell. They did go 4465 and 5, but this just loses, which is how the game ended. They can't go 6633 and 2. They can't go 4465 and 2. We just go in 5 and we're way up. They go 6633 in 1. We go Tarama in 5, and they can't flip anything. We win 6-4. And if they go 4-4-6-5 in 1, did I do the classic thing where I check the actually good move last? Because it seemed the least obvious move? Maybe. 4-4-6-5 in 1. Yeah, that looks like it's the tie. So I think this would have tied here. They ended up going in 5, and yay, we beat Bot Club Spade again. So this game worked a little better, and I thought this was interesting in the sense that, like, another way of thinking would never do this move because, right, this card has a clear use that is not replaceable in the hand. And that tends to be more how I think, right? I tend to sort of segment, okay, these cards are already, which clearly means I'm in some sense a talk to your cards kind of player, right? I'm somewhere between Face Theory and Talk to Your Cards, where I play a proper lock in your cards, create challenges for the opponent's style, but I'm also making sure like none of my cards are going to be dead at the end, that they're all playing pretty well. I'm somewhere between those two, I think. Which means this kind of move would be a hard move for me to make because I look at the position and I think I need that card for 6. This is a non-redundant thing. Let's try to find a way to, use a weaker card in the hand. A card that's not fundamentally weaker, but is less play against the opposing hand given the cards on the board. But by looking at their cards more than looking at our own, I think this move starts to make more sense. It's okay to concede something because it really does create problems for the opponent's hand. I have one more game for you from this setup. One more kind of test of a style. I think all these styles worked out pretty well. I think basically everything, at least one of the moves considered, either beat spade or should have beaten spade if I hadn't screwed up, or was clearly on the pressuring side. There was only one game, and it was the previous Talk to Their Cards game where we really got in trouble out of this and had to be careful. Oh no, there was a combo game we got in trouble too. But combos, you're always going to get in trouble some percentage of games when you have a combo style. Okay, and finally, the Jedat style of kind of, do you control different parts of the board? And you look at this starter and you think, okay, there's no like single card in my hand that controls it. But working together, my hand controls it pretty well. So I feel the bottom right of the board, you haven't created problems for me over there. So the Jedat style says I don't have to interact with that, right? That part of the board is fine for me. You have a card, if you ever play near it, I can lock it in. That part of the board is under control. So what I should do is I should make other parts of the board under control as well. And the move I came up with here, and it was kind of similar to some ideas from the other example, where last time the starter was here, and my Jedat style move was this one, which Akiyama and Delial both also had ideas in 8. Deli liked this one, Akiyama liked this one. I think if we were to rank the 3, these 2 moves are probably a bit better than this one, but also credit to Akiyama for being creative and putting out a real clunker of a card that's going to annoy the opponent, even if our cards don't play off it very well. But those were all 3 kind of more Jedat style ideas. But one thing about all of them is 3, 4, 7, 5 controls anything that could go next to those cards, right? As soon as we occupy 8, we control the space near it. And so similarly with this starting move, it feels like with Tarama, if we play a card in 2, Tarama can give us really nice control of part of the board. So I started looking at moves in 2, and kind of inspired by what Akiyama said, though I do think it was the weakest of the 3 moves in 8 in the last example, I thought 3, 6, 5, 6 is these 6s and 5s are just, he's a real clunky boy. Our opponent has a lot of trouble taking them. They have 1 capture, 6, 6, 3. It's almost safe. And we don't have great recaptures. We have a recapture from 1. We have a couple captures from 5. We have nothing in 3. But it's very clunky for them. And we control all the space that it sort of creates. It sort of makes 1 and 3 these isolated chambers that Tarama is really good at controlling. And so this move jumped out at me, and 7-2-5-5 does a decent job controlling too. And I think this is the kind of, I'm not sure this is exactly what Jedat would play, but kind of the way he's described playing and some of the moves I've seen him make, this seems a fitting move of like, hey, I have the bottom right under control. I need to figure out the rest of the board. I want to have control of all parts of the board. And so instead of the other things where, like, just to run through them quickly, face theory says very specifically, like, what are your outfacing sides? What are my outfacing sides? How can I have a positive differential between them? And combo says, how can I set up the maximum synergies, hopefully that you don't share? Neither of these styles have any interest in this move, right? Talk to your cards. Talking to my cards does not get me to this move. This does not, maybe it does. Maybe this makes Tarama and 7-2-5-5 happy. So actually, maybe a talk to your cards player likes this move. Maybe there's a type of talk to your cards player that's like, yes, this move's great, right? I talked to my cards, my 3-6-5-6 wasn't doing much, and neither were my 7s facing up, and now they've all done something useful. Okay. And to talk to your opponent's cards, maybe they don't mind this move either, but I think nothing gets to it as quickly as a kind of, hey, Bottom right, don't worry about that. So let's do something in the top or the top left or the left, some other area of the board. What's the easiest one for me to control? Oh, yeah, I'm really good going up. So, how can I make it so there are pockets of space that only I can attack or only I can control? And I think this is a pretty neat move. The Bot Club Spade went here, which is not losing, but we certainly don't mind seeing it. I said, okay, what pockets of space have sort of been created? And I thought, Tarama in 8 just looks really good here. I don't see why I would do anything else. Now, it turns out there's a save here. There is one move that saves, and it is, in my opinion, quite amusing. So we'll get back to that in a second. Bot Club Spade did not find the move. They played, what did they play? They grabbed safety. Now that 7-4-4 is out of my hand, I don't control the top as well, but I control the bottom so well it's not going to matter. Um, huh. So I think I put the game in wrong because it's having me play 3-6-5-6 again. I think I might have gone here, and then this played out, and then I went here, and this was winning. But I think it's very similar if you start here. I think spade. I bet spade would also go here. You could also do something like this. So in the actual game, my bad that I got this wrong in my input. Maybe it's not right here because now I'm not sure which position it was. But there was some position where this was the one and only tie. And that's a cool tie. That's a cool move to have as the only tie. Does it make any sense? Well, 4-6-7-1 is a really good sweeper here. It actually completely controls the left side. Even 3-6-5-6 and 1 is not safe to it. And it controls 3-4-7-5 and 1 as well. So it completely dominates the left. But 5-3-5-5 is not that great if it can't land in 6. So I think the obvious question is what happens if 6 is just blocked? Oh, but then 5-3-5-5 rules. 5-3-5-5 switches over and dominates the left. Oh, that's so cool. All the pluses line up really well. All right, what a cool move in 5. Just going into a T where you control none of the easily defendable cards, and you're down 6-4, and you only control the crap cards that are easily accessible by everything, right? Because in any T, what's the most valuable square to control? 8, because it's locked in. What are the second and third most valuable squares? 7 and 9, because they only have one thing out facing. They're pretty easily locked in. Fourth most valuable? Hard to say between 2 and 5, which is fourth and which is fifth, but both are not very valuable because they're likely to flip, and often you don't want them to be yours because there's combo potential through them. There's the ones most likely to have combo potential through them. So you don't have any of the 3 cards that you almost always want, and you have both the 2 cards that you may not want at all, and somehow that's the tying line. There's someone out there that'll like look at this and be like, that move doesn't seem that hard to find. And I want that person to know they are wrong. Or that move doesn't seem that creative or different. They are wrong. This is a very strange move to have tie. That person is deeply, deeply wrong. This is a bananas move. This is possibly I think almost certainly the weirdest move that could tie in this position. You might say something like a non-capture in 6 could be weirder. Something like this. But usually when that move is played, it's like a big combo setup, and it sort of pairs these squares. I think that's much more common than this. So that was a fun line. The bot didn't find it, and we went on to win pretty comfortably here. And I thought the Jedat style moves, be it 3-6-5-6 or 7-2-5-5, either one makes sense, right? Because either one I'm saying Tarama controls the space. Right now 3-6-5-6 is looking better to me, but it does look like in actuality I switched over to this move for who knows what reason. Probably the easier recaptures, but I'm not sure how necessary they are. But against a starter like this kind of controlling space in a different part of the board and just saying now I have good play in 2 parts of the board, which is most of the board because it's not that big a board. I thought was a pretty compelling way to play it, and turned out well here. So yeah, all in all, I think these are all pretty viable, and I will probably, as I watch future tournament games, current signups for SE 2023, which will probably I'll list in my tournaments as a 2024 tournament because that's when most of it will happen. Um, I'll be interested in looking at games and kind of thinking about what kind of thinking leads to moves that different players play. Because it was very interesting, for instance, for me to see. I try not to talk too much about player specific weaknesses. Uh, and this isn't a weak move, but that Vialva, I expected to pick this move in 5. I thought I really like this move in 5, and I think it fits Vialva's style. And I was even happier when Vialva said, the one problem is it sets them up 2 and 9, because that seemed to me the natural continuation from a combo player's perspective. So I thought it was really cool that he saw the same thing, that the same thing was he was drawn to. But Vid mentioned this move in 5 as well. He actually mentioned this move in 4, which is solid but not one I considered, as I think I'd do that in a random game, but in a serious game, I'd probably play this move in 5. Because I don't think of Vid as that style of player, but it actually makes some sense to me given where Vid got in trouble in TTAC in the open games against Tezuka and Delial. They were positions, I think, the combo player's instincts would lead you astray, where you kind of just have to block up some squares and play a more fundamental lock cards in game rather than a combo setting up game. And vacillating between those two is really hard. And I think kind of the optimal combo player. I talked last time about D and how D has a tremendous record against top players. Is putting up over 50% against other winners, which is a fantastic record. You might think, well, half of winners are over 50% against other winners, but this is not true because the problem is the winners that have played the most games are the best winners. So you are more likely to have run across Delial or Yojimbo than you are to have run across, I don't want to call out weaker winners, but one-timers who didn't play very long are just not going to be the people you're going to run into repeatedly. It's the top end names. If you play Seto 3 times, that's very different than if you play. God, I can't do it. Insert name here 3. Insert almost anyone here 3 times. Even great players like Kamikaze is not as good as Seto. Though I personally have been crushed every time I faced Kamikaze in a tournament. But my point is, the average winner is going to be below 50% against other winners because their distribution of matches is not random, right? Their distribution of matches is they're more likely to have faced the best rather than weaker ones who go out earlier and probably didn't play as long. So D being over 50% against winners when D is of tournament winners, probably a little below average, which is still excellent, is a tremendous feat. But D is also one of the least reliable players at beating weaker opponents, right? It is just very factually in the record. If you are a top player, D has a very good chance to beat you. If you are a weaker player, D also has a very good chance to beat you, but it's not that much higher. And I think this comes out of a style that makes for really complex games that can just go any which way, right? If you are setting up to maximize your combo potential, then as we looked at, what was the best game here? In a position like this one, which is just very complicated, maybe this or something like this is the move that gives you the most combos and the most squares. Say something like this, and it loses. And it's just really easy for that to happen. And it's a style where you really have to balance when are you setting more stuff up and when are you just cashing in and saying, okay, 6 is a square, I have to just take it. It's too valuable a square to leave alone. I think that's really tricky. I think that's really tricky for the combo-oriented player. I don't know who the best player we've seen of this style is. If this is Vid style, which I don't know, then it's probably Vid. Um, it could be that a bunch of earlier players did this very successfully, and I don't know it. Like maybe I have no idea. Let's say Doc Evil played this way, but I doubt he did. Uh, so maybe Vid, maybe D. Some games of Tezuka's I look at, I think he's here, but some games I don't think he plays like this at all. So I think he's sort of got some in this direction, but not that much. I don't think MC or Nightwish played particularly like this. I don't think Kamikaze or Koner a little more so. Um, Delial sometimes does, but Delial sometimes does everything, so that's just not very useful. Seto is very combo oriented, but I think in a really different way than this kind of operating through 5 and setting up maximal combos. Seto just plays a really. I mean, Seto's very combo oriented, but it's very deep in a peculiar way and hard for me to get a grasp on. I do think Vialva is one of the best players we've seen who plays like this. But I think it's also a reason Vialva has swingy results, is because it's just really hard to get the exact ratios of it right. Um, those are probably the best of the sort of combo-y style. Yeah, I think it's tough. I now kind of want to make myself as a combo-oriented player and see how good I could be doing that, but not sure that's the the right path for me. But it's cool to see how far people can go playing different ways. And I'd love to do a better job of categorizing, like, here's a player who really championed a certain type of play. And it could be like certain moves. Like, I used to think Turds was a real champion of the adjacent corner. But then he didn't play them much for a while. And he had some other things going on. And most players are sort of more complex, and like, not all positions are going to call for something. And we vary as time goes on. There was the period where Yevon was a real champion for aggressive side starters, where, like, if, say, blue was first to move here, Yevon would be really likely to stick something in 2 because Tarama controls 1 and 3 so well. And then he did great in a monthly open, and then he just stopped doing them. And he basically hasn't done them since. And there was this complete rework of his style. And for a while, he had worse results, but then recently, of course, he's had fantastic results, just incredible. And playing very differently. Semifinals of TTAC, wins a TTN tournament, wins a bunch of other minor events. Like, Yevon's been phenomenal, but he's clearly remade himself. He's not a champion of just one thing. At different times, he finds different things intriguing. And we all have that to some extent. But I also, it'd be cool to be like, look, this player who, like, doesn't have to win the tournament, but like made like a semifinals run in this tournament really showed this way of playing, right? Maybe an interesting way of building hands, maybe an interesting way of playing those hands. I've talked about how I think Akiyama uses center replies to corner starters in a different way than almost anyone else does. Just a very distinct use of them that he does regularly, and I just don't think you see anywhere else. Um, and so there's some specifics like that. I think for me, and I, again, per usual, use me as an example just because I'm most familiar with my own games, not because I think I'm the most interesting of examples. The reason I try to use people like Delial as an example is because I think he is the most interesting of examples. But I think I am not a super interesting example, but I have, in my Triad Wars winning run, I really solidified into meeting starters by capturing them or with adjacent corners. And by basically playing for L's every game, I just had confidence I could defend whatever L's were coming. And the times I got in trouble, the time I got in huge trouble against Delhi in the quarterfinals, was a position on second turn where I played an opposite corner and couldn't navigate the game into an L. And that doesn't mean L's are what everyone should aim for. There are certainly players who do not play that kind of position well. But it was the type of position I could navigate to reliably and was not going to get in trouble with. So I really narrowed the range of the positions I got, because if you see a corner starter and you take it, they're probably locking, not that move, they're probably locking back in, and you can set up some kind of L somewhere, right? There are different options for where it is. But if you have those L's well figured out, in fact, here, as we've established, this is a pretty good move. But usually I would go for these captures aiming for an L. And if you play an adjacent corner, often they will block the in-between square, and you have various choices of how to set up L's. And I just had confidence that I could play those well, and that those were the most comfortable way for me to meet corner starters. So I think there are examples like that you can point to. And then there are things you can point to that are fun in a different direction, like the fact that Deli plays every move type at reasonably frequent rates makes him a just fascinating player in a whole different way. And it's cool there are players like that running around too. But in the past, I've tried to sort of do aggressive and defensive, and then figuring out what to do with the other axis is always tricky. I went for concrete versus intuitive the last time I tried to do a style thing. But I think maybe that kind of graph is really fun, right? XY axis stylistic thing. You can put different dots, different places on the graph, and see where there are clusters. I don't know that it got very far, and I'm sort of thinking these theories of how to play and what moves naturally fit them might be more indicative of stuff. Because to come back to my example of what if Vid's interest, and again, I normally don't try to talk about weaknesses of players, but I actually think if this is a weaknesses of Vid's and he addressed this would make him a stronger player, and it would be cool if Vid was an even stronger player than he is. If this was his instinct, that is some evidence of this was his instinct, and that is some evidence that he is a combo-oriented player with the strengths and weaknesses that come with it. And there were 2 games in TTAC against Tezuka and Delial. You can go find the games, I think, where he was against an adjacent corner. Not exactly this, but just let's pretend this, or pretend this, something like this. And there was there were paths to ties in both games that weren't that complicated by going into, allowing the L, and then blocking the kind of setup square, right? They've set up 5, okay, you just get rid of 5. I'm not sure these exact moves work, but there were paths to ties like this, saying, okay, I'm going to get rid of the in-between square they've set up there. I don't have good play there. That's a bad square for me. I can get rid of it, and I can survive against the L. And both games, he went in a distant square. Not necessarily these exact squares, but 7, 8, or 9. And both games, he was, I think, either lost or almost lost after playing those moves, and went on to lose. Now, I didn't check many of his other games. These might have just been weird random things, or happened to have bad days. Whatever. There's lots of reasons why people can lose games, and you don't always want to draw the big conclusions. But after seeing that his instinct was here, I thought the combo player in this kind of position doesn't want to block the in-between square and have a kind of game of lock-ins and captures. This is not the combo player's wheelhouse. The combo player, and one of his games, the one against Delial, he goes somewhere like here, Delial goes here, and he plays a big combo setting up move in 5. Imagine this setup combos in like 2, 4, and 6, or at least some of those squares. And this turned out to be losing, but it was the move that maximized how much combo potential he had in the position, and it happened not to work out, and Deli found a really nice win. I think it was in 6, so not obvious at all, right? Again, don't pay attention to which cards I actually put there, just the structure. But Deli's win was subtle and tricky and very much not obvious. And so it's not like Vid played a bad game here, but it was the problem with the combo style, right? The move that sets up maximum combos has a lot of appeal to it, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And it's very hard, at least for me, to differentiate the moments it does and doesn't work. Um, and especially when it doesn't work because of a move in six, that's just so hard to find. Don't blame Vid at all for that. But it struck me that there was just a kind of defensive, shut the game down, get it over with, move on to the next game way of blocking the in between square. And instead, he went for the move that set up various stuff around the board, and then even more so went for the big setup move on the next move. And if you're looking for big setup moves, playing against an L is just not very appealing, right? And I think in general, combo players are not looking to play against the L and are going to look to play moves in squares like 7, 8, or 9. And sometimes you just got to cash out and say, no, 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 I don't have anything here. I can't go for combo oriented play. So I wonder if that's a weakness. It also could have just been two games that happened to go wrong, right? There are certainly consecutive losses I've had where you could point to here is a consistent trait between them, and you might be onto something, but you also might be like, yeah, I missed a line that day, and then I happen to miss something kind of similar, and there's not much to take from it. But sometimes there also is a lot to take from it, and usually in competitions, the games we can learn most from are the games we ourselves played. They're for a few reasons. One is they're the games we're by far the most engaged with and have thought the most about. And so when we see an improvement, it's the thing where it can connect to our other thinking the most. And brains work well with connections, right? The more ways things connect up, the more we lock in the understandings of them. And so the more we've engaged with something, the better chance it has to connect with it. And we're always going to engage with our own games more than we engage with any other games. So, one reason to look at our own games is because we will always take in the lessons, or we always have the capability to take in the lessons more powerfully than we would then from other places. But the other thing is, our own games is where our strengths and weaknesses are shown. And, I've spent a decent amount of time looking at my mistakes and my losses. Not as much as I should have, but a bit. Trying to find where I'm a flawed player, and then trying to conclude where do I need to either avoid certain types of positions because I just don't think I'm capable of handling them well. One thing coming into the return was I remembered, and having looked at a few positions coming into the return, I thought I am really bad at defending the J. In general, positions. What's an example we looked at today? This position actually turned out to be winning, but in general, positions like this, if I don't have clear combo setups or clear safety, I handle these positions badly. Or at least I did. I thought, I've handled these positions badly. One of the last tournament games, probably the last tournament game I played before I left in like 2012 13, was a loss to Nightwish in the quarterfinals of a tournament. And it was just a J position, and I think there were many things I could have done that would have been fine. But nothing was clicking as clear, and I couldn't grasp anything clear in the position. This feels like one of the most abstract positions to me, and I like to look for concrete things. So I thought, I handled the J badly. What do I need to do? Specifically on second turn, I do badly in the J. Well, I don't have to play that many Js, right? If you start in a corner, I don't have to go 5. I very rarely go in the far side anyway, but if I stop going in 5 very much, then I just won't have to defend very many Js. Now, if I do go in 5, I hopefully have set up combo potential, so those will be Js where hopefully I have more play than most of the Js I think about, but it just meant as I started veering away from playing 5 replies to corner starters, I stopped having to defend the J near as much. There are also Js, say there was a side starter, and you go, I don't know, something in the far corner, and they go 5. You can get J's this way, and I still do defend some J's this way. And there are also positions where someone goes in 5 and you go in a corner and then they go 2 and you're defending a J. But I thought a little bit about how I want to defend those variants of them. And specifically, when I am playing in a far corner from a side starter, or I'm meeting a side starter in a corner, specifically making sure I'm thinking, am I sure the resulting J's are the kind of J's I can think about well? And one of my proudest games was against Turds. I was looking for the game recently, I couldn't find it. I forget the move order that got there. But we ended up with something, I think the cards were in, no. The cards were in these squares. It won't let me move, sometimes it does that. Okay. Cards were in these squares, and it was a vague J against Turds, a very strong player who, if I screw up, is going to beat me. And I found a way to go in 3, sort of sacking the top row, but once the top row was sacked, it forced a specific card out of his hand, and I could find a way to a tie. And I found a clean way to do it, and that was, for me, a really big moment of, this was a clearly difficult J to defend. There was nothing clean to do. There wasn't safety. I didn't have combo setups. And I can, there are a few paths to ties. I can find them. I can make the right move, even though it chucks a card. And that's something I was having a lot of trouble doing before I left, 10 years ago, was in abstract J's where I didn't have a clear thing to do. I couldn't find ways to get the cards to come together and work. And I've been better at doing that here. And some of that has been conscientious work. And also some of it has just, what I've done is both. I have sort of, my repertoire of moves lead to a structure I am uncomfortable with less, right? I play moves, which means I don't have to defend as many of these. And I have thought more about sequencing moves, figuring out which cards have play and which cards I need to get out of my hand, sequencing moves when there aren't clear kind of, here's locking in safety, or here's setting up a combo. When I don't have tools like that, figuring out how can I organize my play such that I still create clear paths to a desired result, which in many cases is getting a tie. I should go find that game. I was really proud of that game. I think that's one of the most important. It was a chat tournament. It wasn't like some big event, but one of my, for me, most important holds, most important defenses, because it was something where I took a weakness and I was capable of getting a result out of a type of thing that gives me troubles. But I think you want to know from your own games where you're having those troubles. And I noticed, and I knew this 10 years ago, I'm having trouble in these positions. Obviously, having the solver so I can check some stuff is an advantage. And if you think you have something like this, please contact me and we can look at the games and I can give you solver analysis. I'm not studying for days and stuff and using this massively, but it was really nice to be able to say, here are some positions I don't get. What should I have done? And then trying to figure out how those moves work. Or looking at someone else playing a game. I don't get what you're supposed to do here. What should be done? And then trying to make sense of that in a way where I can hopefully apply it further in my own games. So yeah, if anyone else ever wants to use the tool, let me know what kind of positions, and I'll go find them and we can look at them. And I'd love to work with players, because I think it's really interesting. So I think that's why looking at your own games is the most useful thing, is both because the lessons will stick better. It will always be something you're more connected with, that you've thought more about, and that you're ready to think more about. But also, it's going to be where your weaknesses are. It's going to be where you can find, hey, here's what I'm doing really well, and here's the thing that's tough for me. And all of these styles are going to have things that are tough for them, right? The face theory player, which, like, I'm somewhere in that direction, is going to have trouble with more abstract positions. The combo player might have trouble with more, there's no combos to be setting up kinds of positions, right? Their standard things of what to look for aren't going to work as well. You know, avoiding the L might be an example of that. But also, sometimes the big combo setups don't work, and just figuring out when you go for them and when you don't is really difficult. Uh, the talk to their cards player, the moves I found for them in this game, that was probably the weakest of the strategies we looked at. And so maybe I haven't figured that out very well, but maybe that's something that's not going to work that well without being helped by some other type of thought as well. Um, the Jedat styles, just it's really hard to think like that. I think very few players think in terms of controlling space, and most of the players that do think more like that, historically at least, I don't think were all that strong, with Jedat as a clear exception, because Jedat was a fantastic player. So, hard to pull off, but in a sense, that's also what Yevon was doing with his aggressive side starters. There are a few players, maybe like every player that made a finals in 2005 is a really creative, interesting player. Because both Yevon and Jedat did that, and both of them play moves and sides that don't fit the normal kind of defensive side strategies and are looking to control space near them and do so at a high and effective level. All right, I've babbled enough now. Let's end this one.